Hello, everybody, and welcome. This is a Legacy School reading lesson for Year 6, Week 6. So for today's lesson, you'll need your reading booklet from pages 9 to 14. You should have already answered all of the questions up until page 9 about the Iron Man. And we're moving on today to a new book called The Sneetches by Dr. Seuss. So it's not really a chapter book. It's more of a long poem, and it's super interesting. I'm pretty sure you're going to love it. So, first of all, what do you know about Dr. Seuss? Do you remember any stories written by him? For me, I grew up reading Dr. Seuss books and listening to my teachers reading them to us. So I particularly love Dr. Seuss books. Have you seen any movies made from his stories? Maybe The Cat in the Hat or The Grinch or anything like that? And why do you think kids like Dr. Seuss? What makes him interesting? I personally find the characters super interesting, and the books themselves have lovely illustrations. They're super colorful, and they always have super funny poems. So before we get to reading, we're going to talk about the reader or about the author a little bit. All right, so if you open up your books to page 9, you'll find an article about the author. I'm going to read it for you. So Theodore Seuss Geisel was born on the 2nd of March, 1904 in the USA. He was a children's author, political cartoonist, an illustrator, a poet, an animator, a screenwriter, and a filmmaker. So he was a pretty busy man. He adopted the name Dr. Seuss at college. He wanted to become an English teacher, just like me, but he left college without earning a degree to pursue a career in writing and drawing. So he never actually graduated from college. During World War II, he drew hundreds of political cartoons supportive of the war effort and against Nazi Germany. After the war, he returned to writing children's novels like Horton Hears a Who, A Cat in the Hat, and How the Grinch Stole Christmas, and my personal favorite, Green Eggs and Ham. He received numerous awards throughout his career, and many of his stories were made into movies and animated movies as well. He wrote more than 60 books and sold over 600 million copies. So from that, we can definitely say that he was he still is actually a very popular author. His stories were translated to more than 20 languages, and he died in 1991 at the age of 87. So we have another paragraph which has some interesting facts, or an interesting fact about him. In 1954, Life magazine, this is a very, very popular publication, it published a report about illiteracy among young school children. So illiteracy is the lack of ability to read. So we're actually taking literacy classes. This helps us to read and to comprehend. But if you are illiterate, that means that you cannot read. And this report concluded that children were not learning to read because their books were boring. So a textbook publishing company gave Dr. Seuss a list of 350 words that a first grader should know to be able to recognize easily. They asked him to shorten the list to 250 words and write a book using these words. So first graders could learn through recognizing them through reading the story. This is how Dr. Seuss wrote The Cat in the Hat, using 236 of the words given to him. I actually found that fact very interesting. I didn't know that. But The Cat in the Hat was one of the stories that I read a lot as a child, and it did help me read a lot. So now that we know a little bit about the author, let's move on to the book. It's called The Sneetches. And it has a moral, or it has an underlying lesson to be learned, and it is about discrimination and racism. So I'll read the story, and then we can discuss that a little bit more later on. I'm also going to upload a PDF of the book, so if you want to read that alone, then you're more than welcome to. I'm going to read it. You can listen to me read it, which will make this video very long, so bear with me. And then after that, if you need to follow up to answer the questions, you can always go back to the PDF. The Sneetches by Dr. Seuss. Now the star-belly Sneetches had bellies with stars. The plain belly Sneetches had none upon theirs. Those stars weren't so big. They were really so small. You might think a thing wouldn't matter at all. But because they had stars, all the Starbelly Sneetches would brag we're the best kind of Sneetches on the beaches. With their snoots in the air, they would sniff and they'd snort. We'll have nothing to do with the plain belly sort. And whenever they met some, when they were out walking, they'd hike right on past them without even talking. When the Starbelly children went out to play ball, could a plain belly get in the game? Not at all. You could only play if your bellies had stars, and the plain belly children had none upon theirs. When the Starbelly Sneetches had Frankfurter roasts, or picnics or parties or marshmallow toasts, they'd never invite the plain belly Sneetches. They left them out cold in the dark of the beaches. They kept them away, never let them come near, and that's how they treated them year after year. And one day, it seems, while the plain belly Sneetches were moping and doping alone on the beaches, just sitting there wishing their bellies had stars, a stranger zipped up in the strangest of cars. "My friends," he announced in a voice clear and keen, "my name is Sylvester McMonkey McBean. And I've heard your troubles, I've heard you're unhappy, but I can fix that. I'm the fix-it-up chappie. I've come here to help you, I have what you need, and my prices are low, and I work at great speed, and my work is 100% guaranteed." Then quickly Sylvester McMonkey McBean put together a very peculiar machine, and he said, "You want stars like a Starbelly Sneetch? My friends, you can have them for $3 each. Just pay me your money and hop right aboard." So they clambered inside. Then the big machine roared, and it clonked, and it blonked, and it jerked, and it blurked, and it bopped them about, but the thing really worked. When the plain belly Sneetches popped out, they had stars. They actually did. They had stars upon theirs. Then they yelled, and the ones who had stars. Then they yelled at the ones who had stars at the start. "We're actually like you. We're exactly like you. You can't tell us apart. We're all just the same. Now, you snooty old smarties, and now we can go to your Frankfurter parties." "Good grief," groaned the ones with stars at the first. "We're still the best Sneetches, and they're the worst. But now how in the world will we know," they all frowned, "if which kind is what and the other way around?" Then up came McBean with a very sly wink, and he said, "Things are not quite as bad as you think. So you don't know who's who. That is perfectly true. But come with me, friends. Do you know what I'll do? I'll make you again the best Sneetches on the beaches, and all it will cost you is $10 eaches." "Belly stars are no longer in style," said McBean. "What you need is a trip through my star-off machine. This wondrous contraption will take off your stars, so you won't look like Sneetches who have them on theirs." And that handy machine worked very precisely, removed all the stars from their tummies quite nicely. Then with snoots in the air, they paraded about, and they opened their beaks and they let out a shout, "We know who is who, now there isn't a doubt. The best kind of Sneetches are Sneetches without." Then, of course, those with stars got frightfully mad. To be wearing a star now was frightfully bad. Then, of course, old Sylvester McMonkey McBean invited them into his star-off machine. Then, of course, from then on, as you probably guessed, things got into a horrible mess. All the rest of the day, on those wild screaming beaches, the fix-it-up chappie kept fixing up Sneetches. Off again, on again, in again, out again. Through the machine, they raced around and about again, changing their stars every minute or two. They kept paying money, they kept running through. until neither the plane nor the starbellies knew whether this one was that one, or that one was this one, or which one was what one, or what one was who. Then, when every last cent of their money was spent, the fix-it-up chappie packed up and went. And he laughed as he drove in his car up the beach. Ah, they will never learn. No, you can't teach a Sneetch. But McBean was quite wrong, I'm happy to say, that the Sneetches got really quite smart on that day. The day they decided that Sneetches are Sneetches, and no kind of Sneetch is the best on the beaches. That day all the Sneetches forgot about stars, and whether they had one or not upon theirs. All right, so that is the story. It's actually a quite fun read. But before we move on to some questions, let's go ahead and discuss some of the vocabulary. So if you open up the PDF, you'll notice that there are a few vocabulary words that are highlighted in red. So you can check that out later. The first thing that we're going to talk about is the word theirs. So this is something called an I dialect. By theirs, they mean, of course, theirs. Stars on their belly. But the author has used the word theirs to maintain the rhyme. So he rhymed stars with theirs, and it makes for an interesting read. The next word we're going to talk about is brag. So to brag is to boast, or to say that you're better than somebody else, or to say, look what I have and you don't have. Bragging, of course, is not a good habit. And the starbelly Sneetches, or the Sneetches that had stars on their bellies, would actually brag and make the Sneetches that don't have a star feel bad about themselves. So we also have the word snoot from the line, with their snoots in the air, they would sniff and they'd snort. So a snoot is actually a nose. So an animal like a dog, or maybe a jackal or a fox, or the Sneetches, if you look at the picture, they have this elongated nose. We call that a snoot. And if you have your snoot or your nose in the air, that means you feel like you're better than somebody else. When you walk with your nose in the air, that means you feel like others are beneath you, or you're extremely proud, but not in a positive way. Let's move on. We have the word Frankfurter. So it said, when the starbelly Sneetches had Frankfurter roasts. A Frankfurter is the original name of a hot dog. So I'm pretty sure you guys are all familiar with hot dogs, and they're very delicious in sandwiches. So the Sneetches would have roasts or barbecues where they would roast Frankfurters, which are hot dogs. And also marshmallow toasts. They would have picnics or parties or marshmallow toast. So a marshmallow toast is when you have a marshmallow on a stick and you roast it in the fire. That's what you would do with a marshmallow. But a toast is when you raise them up and you say, here's to being the best Sneetch, for example. Let's move on. We also have the word moping. They were moping and doping along on the beaches. So when you're moping, it means you're walking around maybe with your head held low, and you're not really in a good mood, or you're feeling down. The next word that we're going to look at or discuss is peculiar. So he came up with a very peculiar machine. Peculiar is a synonym for strange or odd or weird or out of the ordinary. And after that we have snooty. Now, you snooty old smarties. So if you are snooty, it's actually an adjective that means that you look down on others, or you are very picky, or you think you're better than someone else. We also have the word contraption. His machine, it was a wondrous contraption. So a contraption is a synonym for a machine, but usually one that is out of the ordinary. All right, so what we're going to discuss next is actually not a word. It's a whole line. It blonked, it clonked, and it blonked, and it jerked, and it burked. So we have lots of onomatopoeia here. That's when a word matches its sound. And like I said, the writer has done this, or the author has done this to make the reading very interesting, or to make the rhymes in the story very interesting. The next thing that we're going to discuss is actually something that's not exactly grammatically correct, but like I said, it makes for a good rhyme and it makes for a very interesting read. So the line says, I'll make you again the best Sneetches on the beaches, and all it will cost you is $10 eaches. So here, instead of saying each, he wrote eaches, and to rhyme it with beaches. It's not grammatically correct, but sometimes you can break the rules when you're writing poetry like this, just to make it fun to read. That's all of the vocabulary that I wanted to discuss with you. Now we can move on to a few questions. So, how did you like the story, and what did you like about it? If you have a piece of paper, I just want you to jot down your ideas. Who are the characters? Can you write that down? For me, I think it's they didn't really have many characters here. They had plain-bellied and star-bellied Sneetches, and also Sylvester McBean. How do the star-bellied Sneetches treat the plain-bellied Sneetches? Well, they didn't really say hi to them. They didn't play with them. They didn't let the children play ball if they didn't have a star on their belly. And of course, they didn't invite them to their parties and barbecues. Why do they treat them this way? Why do you think? So they treated them this way because they didn't have a star on their belly, which is a ridiculous reason to do that. But some people, they follow these quite silly opinions that they form about people just because they are different. Of course, it's not a right thing to do, and we call that discrimination. So you've previously learned about discrimination in your histories and humanities classes in the previous years. What is discrimination? I'm sorry, don't mind that spelling error. It's just a typo. Discrimination is treating people differently based on the way that they look, or their skin color, or their religion, or gender, or just their beliefs. Of course, you've heard about racism. And what kind of discrimination do you think that is? It's discrimination based on a person's race, whether they are Asian, or whether they're Sudanese, for example, or the color of their skin. Not just Asian, but it could be Asian or African or South American, or you get the idea from a different place. There's more than white people. There's more racism than just white people being racist against people of color. People of color can also discriminate against white people, and also they can discriminate against other people of color. Countries can also be racist against people of other nations, and even immigrants. So an immigrant is somebody that would come to your country for work. So we have a lot of that happening here in Sudan. For example, if somebody came here from Ethiopia, which is something that's very common, some people might not treat them very nicely, and that's also racism and discrimination. So you've also learned about slavery and the KKK and the fight of African Americans for rights. You've heard about civil rights leaders like Malcolm X and Martin Luther King Jr., Rosa Parks, and Ruby Bridges. So I'm pretty sure you all have a good idea about what racism and discrimination is. You've also learned about police brutality in the US and other countries, and discrimination against Latin Americans in the US, and violence against immigrants. But let's think about the country that we live in now. Do you think Sudan is free from racism? Think long and hard about that. No. We are all Sudanese, of course, but we're dealing with a different type of racism. It's called tribalism. As you know, people in Sudan come from different regions and different tribes, like Jali or Shaigi or Mahasi, for example. And tribalism is a form of discrimination where people discriminate or talk badly or treat people badly based on where they're from or which tribe they are from. So, In what way can the actions of the Starbelly Sneetches be called discrimination? Without thinking or consideration, just based on the fact that they have stars on their bellies, they shut the other group. They didn't have stars on their bellies, they shut the group out. So the Starbelly Sneetches, they automatically thought that they were better, and they wouldn't allow the other Sneetches to join in their activities only because they didn't have stars on their bellies, and which that's something that they can't control at all. Can you think of any adjective to describe Sylvester McBean? I would say that he was inventive and creative, but he was also very sly and crafty and clever, but he was greedy as well. He didn't have the best of intentions. Sylvester is what we call an opportunist. And what do you think that word means? Think about it for a few seconds. So, opportunist comes from the word opportunity. An opportunist is a person who grabs the chance to take advantage for himself, who exploits circumstances to gain advantage for himself. So, how did he exploit the situation for himself, you ask? He took advantage of the Sneetches' stupidity and naivety and made a lot of money. So, the ones who didn't have stars in their bellies wanted them so badly, so he made them pay to go through the machine and get stars in their belly. And then again, the Sneetches who had stars wanted to be unique, so he made them pay even more money to remove their stars. So he took advantage of that opportunity. It is unfortunately happening in real life, in a lot of wars, when two sides are against each other. A third party could come in and maybe sell them weapons, or sell weapons to both sides. That's usually what happens. And everybody thinks that that person is on their side, but the third party is usually just in it to make some money while everybody else suffers. So, how does Sylvester advertise his services? How is he selling himself? All right, so if you remember, he says, "I've come here to help you. I have what you need, and my prices are low, and I work at great speed, and my work is 100% guaranteed." So this is how he advertises to the Sneetches. Do you think Sylvester is a morally bad person? Definitely, without a doubt, he is a morally bad person. He took advantage of a situation. Instead of talking them all down and reminding them that they are all Sneetches at the end of the day, no matter what they look like or what they have on their bodies, he took advantage of the situation and made some money out of it. Do you think morally good behavior is important in a society? Of course. People should act according to what is good and not do what is wrong. So, do you think everybody in society can be morally responsible or do the right thing? Of course, you're going to have members who don't always do the right thing. But if the vast majority acts correctly or does the right thing, or at least strives to do the right thing, it will create a healthy and strong society. All right, let's think about the message of this book. What do you think it is? We talked a little bit about it earlier. So the message is racism and discrimination is very bad, and that we should fight for equality. Equality is treating everybody equally. Do you think Sylvester has a good opinion about the Sneetches? He thinks they're silly and stupid, and we know this from this line. You can't teach a Sneetch. This is a very pessimistic view. The word pessimistic means you think very negatively. Sylvester has a bad opinion of the Sneetches, who represent humans in a way. Or the Sneetches are representing humans. For example, a Starbelly Sneetch could be a person of a certain race, and a plain belly Sneetch could be a person of a different race. And it kind of shows how they discriminate against each other. All right, so does the story end with this negative feeling, or is there a positive ending? So although Sylvester thinks Sneetches and humans are terrible, the book finishes in a very positive way, if you remember. The Sneetches, they decided that Sneetches are Sneetches. So they are all the same. They understand that everyone is the same. So it tells us that Dr. Seuss believes in humanity and believes that humans can learn and be good. All right. This tells us that Dr. Seuss is the opposite of a pessimist. He's optimistic, and he believes in optimism. Optimism is being positive or having a positive view of the world. All right, so now that we have read the story and explained it, you have some homework. You're going to answer pages 12 to 14 in your reading booklet. So here are some pages of your work. I'm not going to read the questions because they should be pretty easy to read now that and to answer now that we've explained everything. If you have any questions, feel more than free to ask me on the Seesaw app. And like I said, I'm going to attach a PDF of the story, so you can always refer back to that to answer the questions. Thank you, and good luck.